Now, what is the examiner looking for exactly? Okay, so he looks at how your essay is structured. For example, how many paragraphs are there? So he can see this before he begins to read. He can see, is there one big paragraph, which is not good? Are there two? Are there three? Are there four? So he can get the idea of how well it is structured just by looking at it. Then he'll ask, are the paragraphs big or are they small? Or are they of equal size? Or is one bigger than the other? This also gives him an idea of the mark he is going to give you. And as I said, he scans, and what's he looking for when he scans? Well, often he's looking for vocabulary. In particular, does he see good words, good vocabulary, or does he see a lot of basic words? And depending on what he can see, he then makes up his mind what kind of mark you could be. Again, before he reads it, he does this. He also scans for good grammar and not so good grammar. So again, this similar to vocabulary, if any grammar or sentences catch his eye as he quickly scans your paper, this gives him an idea of what your mark will be, and then he reads quickly to see if he is correct, and then he gives you the mark. So let's look at what the examiner does with your essay. Well, the examiner marks a lot of papers every day. He marks, so he can mark up to 40 different people. That's about 80 papers if you include writing part 1 and 2. He wants to mark these papers quickly because it takes a long time, and he wants to mark them, get out, and collect his pay, which is the most important thing to the examiner. At first, he does not read your essay. So instead, he looks at it and he scans for language which may tell him your level of English. So he wants an idea of your English level before he begins to read the essays. Afterwards, then, he begins to read. But he already thinks he knows your mark. So then he reads it and tries to confirm this. And as he's doing it, of course, he looks at the marking criteria, or band descriptors as they're described here. So this is a picture of the public version. You can get this off the internet or from the website for IELTS. However, it's not exactly the same as the examiner's version. In fact, the examiner's version is much more detailed and tells little specific things for the examiner to look for each level and for each category. And the examiner has this all the time on his desk as he marks your paper. So again, if he wants to check what the mark is, and he thinks it's a close mark, say between 5 and 6, he quickly looks at these band descriptors and decides. He looks to see what they say the mark should be. So the examiner will focus on specific parts of each of these criteria as he reads your essay. So he will look at each criteria, each little box, and he will pick out things that he should pay close attention for when he reads your essay. And he usually does this with everyone's essay. So there are specific details in his writing criteria, or his marking criteria, that tell him what your mark is. So writing task 1 is marked for 4 skills that were on the marking criteria, and these are the ones. So the first column you saw in the marking criteria was task achievement. So that means answering the question. The second column was cohesion and coherence. That refers to connecting ideas and connecting sentences. Third one was lexical resource, which basically means vocabulary. And the fourth one, grammatical range and accuracy. So that refers to grammar. So when you get marks, you're getting marks for these 4 skills, or these 4 categories: task achievement, cohesion and coherence, lexical resource, grammatical range and accuracy. And many times a student can do well in two and not so well in another two, and then you work out the score, for example. Now in task 1, it has different question types in IELTS. So you may see some graphs or charts or tables, this kind of thing, where you have data on a graph, a chart, or a table, like a pie chart, for example. Then you have maps. Then there are process diagrams. So this I will show you in a moment, describe a process that takes place from beginning to end. And there's a development type of question. I think they're the least common, but they do exist. So here are the aforementioned graphs and charts and tables as well. And in this picture, you see a pie chart, you see a graph in the middle, and there's a table, part of a table, on the end of the picture. So this is what you can expect to see for task 1. If you get this type of question, then you are looking at lines and numbers, and you have to describe the data on these graphs, tables, and charts. This is what a process looks like. This is actually 2 pictures of a process. So, but if you just look at one, for example, you see a process here. It tells you what it's about, and then you must decide where to begin and describe what the process is from beginning to end. Often they do not tell you where it begins, so you must decide yourself and then describe the process, and they will give you the name of the process when you do the test. Here's a map, or the example of a map. So this is 2-picture map. It's the same place, but some things have changed. You have 2 years. One is 1936, the other is 2007. So there's a lot of years between these pictures, and there have been quite a few changes, and 1 or 2 things may have stayed the same, but you must describe all these in your IELTS task 1. And finally, here's a development. This is a development of a horse from millions of years ago until today. This one looks particularly difficult, I think, but you have to describe how the horse has developed from 40 million years ago until the modern day horse we see today. So in the exam itself, so you have 20 minutes for writing task 1. They give you 1 hour to do task 1 and 2, and they suggest 20 minutes for writing task 1. If you want to take less or more, that is up to you, but that's the recommended time. And you must also write 150 words in order to get to satisfy the rules. However, the examiners know that you may write just under that, say 140, and that may be okay, but if you write fewer words than 140, then you will lose 1 mark, and this 1 mark usually comes off the first category, the task achievement. So it's very important to write or keep to the word count. They want 150 words. Secretly, they accept 140, but 1 word less than that, and they minus 1 from your mark. So you must be very careful at the number of words you write. Okay, I said I'd give you a short introductory piece of advice for this. So the key, I would say, the first thing and the first rule for the student to do, or to obey, if you like, is to mention everything you see in the picture. So if it's a graph or a table, you should mention every single detail, all the data in some form or another. Some pieces of data can be reported with more emphasis than others, but it is advisable to mention everything. The same for the other types of task 1, for example, the maps and the differences and the similarities, for example, the development, and particularly I would say it's very important to mention everything you see in the process diagrams also. So the first piece of advice is make sure you mention everything you see in the graphs, the charts, the table, the process, the development, the maps. And also an additional piece of advice, sometimes a student knows a lot more than they show the examiner on their piece of paper. So you need to make the good language come out of your head, go through your fingers and write it down. And the rule should always be in the writing. Show what you know. Keep this in mind. You want to show as much as you know to the examiner within the rules, within the limits of task 1 test.